Okay.
Okay, and we go. Nice. Okay, as usual, let's start with devs sync. So yeah, I'm still awaiting the RC delegation review. So meanwhile, I've stepped away from Hive because I don't have much to do. And yeah, and I promised to do some community stuff, so I'm working on communities finally. So I pretty much spent a lot of time looking into what was suggested over time and what is feasible. Like I tried to find some low-hanging fruits. Turns out there are very few. It's kind of, well, I mean, we'll get into it later, so I don't want to go overboard with it. But long story short, there is a lot of stuff that requires us to redesign the way HiveMind is designed in terms of like its integration with communities. Because otherwise we would have performance hogs, because most of the communities interactions that we want to do happens at the post layer. I mean, when you process the comment operation, which obviously, since it's like one of the most widely used operation, it has some very significant performance issues. So yeah, I mean, we'll discuss more about it later on. But yeah, mostly looking into it, drafting a few test plans and things like this.
Okay. Also, Gandalf mentioned to me, we talked before the meeting, he said you'd mentioned some ideas of doing some, oh, maybe Archangel's trying to say something.
Classic.
Either that or he's got some bees located there. Okay, well, actually, it's only when I talk I hear like an echo on his line. So I think the bees are me.
Oh. Oh yeah, that's right. Ah, great. Thank you, Archangel. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so Gandalf had mentioned you talked about making some changes to the CLI wallet, possibly. Is that correct?
Oh yes, right. It's just that, I mean, yes, but also I saw that Gandalf was tackling a bunch of stuff on the CLI wallet, so I guess we have to think at one point to see who does what. But I felt like communities was had more reward to it in terms of like work to reward ratio, whereas just adding the history to the CLI wallet doesn't bring that much to the everyday user.
Okay.
But yes, I mean, it's on my to-do list, and I'm willing to hand it over to Gandalf if he's like on it.
I'm thinking it's a much easier task. That's my fault.
Oh yeah, obviously, but like yeah. it's a small task among many others, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Okay. Was it? I guess you were probably finished your coverage, or I don't know if you had anything else.
Oh yeah, I was done.
Okay. Okay. Great. Then I'll move on to what we've been working on. So most recently, we've just completed testing of a half replay on the Hive D side. So this is basically testing the SQL serializer writing data, basically doing a replay and writing data to the Postgres database for half. And we had some more optimizations and also fixing some bugs that were detected during the testing process. So we got that down to what I think is quite amazing, 5.5 hours for the full replay. And Gandalf claims it's because we're running on some non-existent hardware. He claims it's not real hardware. He wants to run it on a real machine. But nonetheless, it is real hardware, and we can actually get more of these systems. So it does have to be tuned to get quite that fast, but still the performance we're seeing is quite good. Other things we've been working on, we also have a branch to test the half-based account history system. So we've tested that. Just so far, we just basically run it through 5 million blocks. We're going to next run a more comprehensive test with 50 million blocks. So we'll be testing two things there. One will be the speed it takes to do the fill up of the database and sync up of the generation of the tables, the auxiliary tables from that database. And then we'll also be testing the API itself, the speed of the API, how fast we can make calls to it, and hopefully get some kind of benchmarks to compare it against the existing Hive D-based account history system. Other work we've been making optimizations and running benchmarks of the HiveMind massive sync process, primarily to fix performance regressions that we saw when we moved to Postgres 12, or at least we think that's the reason for the regressions is Postgres 12. It's possible it could also be changes that we've made for other work, but I think most likely culprit's going to be Postgres 12. So we've just about finished this work now. So now we're really just about to run another big test to test the performance on a Postgres 12 system and just verify that the fixes get the times back up to what we'd like to see. On a related task, we're planning to update one of our production HiveMind servers to Ubuntu 20. So far we've been running all our production servers on 18, and we're kind of basically planning to move everyone towards Ubuntu 20 for too long. So we want to at least get one production system where we can start to do real world benchmarks, and specifically on the HiveMind API, just to be sure that and running under Postgres 12 as well, just to be sure that that none of this causes any issues. Obviously, Postgres 12 would be the most likely culprit if we see any problems. Another thing we've done is we ran into a situation where we were running HiveMind sync, a massive sync, on a system, and it ran out of disk space. Just to avoid that, we did some more work to basically reduce the peak database usage during the massive sync process. So what we were seeing is that when you ran your massive sync to fill up your HiveMind database, it would temporarily use more space than it really needed after it finished. So that's what I'm referring to by peak database size reduction. So we basically made a change where we basically copy off we copy off some data to a temporary table, we truncate the big table, and then we restore the data back. And this allowed us to cut off the peak database size by about 141 gigabytes. So we were seeing that you needed about a 700 gigabyte disk to do the massive sync, and now we're down to about 565 gigabytes. So that's the current improvement. If obviously, as the longer the database gets, the more that improvement. The larger the database gets, the more useful it becomes.
That's actually a big change for me personally, because my favorite system has 2 terabytes of fast storage space, and to keep Hive and HiveMind both on using the same storage, I was running out of space. So those extra 100 gigabytes makes a big difference, and it's more than that. So I'm happy.
Glad we're keeping you happy.
Yeah, otherwise I would have to buy a second server.
Well, our servers also tend to run on 2 terabyte systems, so I think 2 terabytes is a very standard disk space size for the fast NVMe drives. So yeah, it's a good goal to keep it within a range where we can operate with those. Let's see. We're also another thing we're doing is we're developing a testing system, a new testing system, and this is the test. So one of the next big tasks we've got is basically port HiveMind to make it a half-based application. And when we do that, we're going to need to verify that new reimplementation using half. So we need a way to check it versus its way it behaves versus the old one. And obviously you can do that at the API level, but that's rather it's a rather difficult way to do really intensive testing. So we've basically creating what I'm calling a database differ, which will allow us to basically run a diff against a HiveMind database and a new half-based HiveMind database, and basically isolate differences so we can look for any potential problems that result from that port. So that work is currently underway as well. And we haven't actually started the move from HiveMind to half, but that's probably going to start in the next day as well. So we'll have a test system ready to basically test it once we've got that done. And I guess other work that's being done, Andre's been working on some of the voting changes for Hard Fork 26 that have been discussed, such as reducing the requirement that you can only vote once every 3 seconds. And so we've got a merge request in for that. That's going to get reviewed and probably merged in the next week, assuming no problems, of course. And it's got a few other changes related to voting too. Like if you edit your vote, you won't basically not be able to get any curation rewards for your edited vote. That was another thing that I think it was pretty much everybody wanted to see changed. So we'll be testing those changes and reviewing them. And I guess the final thing that's been going on, and this is not so much a coding thing, but more a DevOps thing. We've leased out a new image server, a much bigger one and much more powerful one, that we're in the process of copying files over to now, so that we can shift our infrastructure to that new image server. So it's got a decent amount more memory, considerably more hard disk space, and just faster CPU, etc. So should be all around a better performer. And that's about it, I guess. It's the main things we've been working on this week.
Cool. We skip Postgres 11 because 18 uses 10, 20 uses 12, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Need to change my tutorial. Cool. Okay. Okay, so I'm assuming all of the fronts are currently busy with Hive changes. Do you have a timeline on when you'll have some bandwidth for some reviews?
I'll defer to Bartek on that one.
Yes, I hope I will find time in this week to check your changes. I'm sorry for delaying that, but really we had to focus on Hive related works, and
you can blame me for that. I've been insisting that we get the half work done first.
Well, then I'm blaming you.
But I'm quite sure I will find time just to focus on this side also this week, and we'll point any my remark in created merge requests. So
I'm sure we'll have it done. Okay, cool. So yeah, then there is kind of like it's like a big block of discussion regarding communities and HiveMind, and yeah, so I guess, well, a long story short, as I mentioned in the dev sync, the main issue right now is that most of the logic for inserting a post, not post data, just a post, is done via a SQL query. I mean, it's a function, I mean, and the issue is that in order to get the data needed in the current implementation, I mean, in order to get the data to validate that post against a community, you have to insert it and then you can validate it. And so all of the community logic, like let's say, should we mute it because it's not in the right community type, which is one of the goals of communities v2, quote unquote, have to be done via, you have to do another query basically, where you would either like, if the post is not correct, then you do another query to like mute it right after it's created, which is obviously not good because you do like one more query, which can like snowball. Although it would only be for community posts, but that can still snowball pretty bad. And so the issue is that if we do it right now, we kind of have to shift all of the community logic into that SQL query to be optimized. But then that leads to like a lot of issues in terms of like difficulty to implement and difficulty to debug, I guess. And also it puts at risk the rest of the indexer because all of the indexer depends on that specific SQL function. So yeah, basically thoughts.
I mean, I guess I generally favor doing it all in the SQL query. I think that is the better way to do it. We want to stay away from any kind of Python, I think, as much as possible for performance reasons.
Yeah, I'm just afraid of like having one big, like that function will basically, the more stuff we add into it will make it like a very, very big SQL query. And I'm afraid of like it's to be hard to test against like.
Well, I mean, we've got a good way to test, right? We can run a massive sync.
Oh, I know, but
so we should have full both performance and logical correctness should be fairly safe on.
It's true. We have a big data set, I guess.
yeah. So I don't think you'd be able to. I think we'd spot any problem that results most likely, I think, would be a performance problem, if anything. That I think, but again, we'll be able to see that very clearly. Of course, even though it's in a single query, it doesn't mean it can't be functionalized into multiple functions, for instance, too. So,
true.
So we don't have to mean, it doesn't mean we wind up with one huge spaghetti query. It can be modularized.
True. So yeah, and then the underlying question was like, thanks to Hive optimizations, is it feasible to do it in Python versus full SQL query? But I guess you answered that already.
Yeah, I mean, Hive, I really think we'll be aiming more towards more things being done in SQL versus Python, in fact.
Yes. I guess Archange needs to do some teaching to all of us. Okay, and then it's more about some, and also I want to open a new discussion, which is, which I thought like 15 minutes before this meeting, but should communities be in HiveMind at all? Because it feels like HiveMind is like it's like an API, but communities is like its own thing, and it would make sense to allow an easier optimization and easier like development to make it its own Hive app, basically. Just because that way we can like improve on communities without impacting the rest of HiveMind. And basically
I guess it depends on really how much different it is, right?
I don't think it would be that different, but it would. But also it would simplify implementing ideas because there are a ton of ideas around.
Well, remember, there's not really a lot of overlap between the API calls, anyways. It's not like you make a change to one API call and you're likely to be breaking other ones. So they're kind of naturally orthogonalized to a large extent. They're relatively independent. So I don't think there's going to be much problem. I mean, you could add another 50 APIs to HiveMind, and I don't think it would really risk any danger to the existing functionality. The issue where you get potential problems is when you actually modify the scheme, the schemas of the tables and things like that.
Which is kind of going to happen at one point.
Yeah, but again, that's mostly your issues then would only result if you actually change existing columns, right? Adding additional columns is usually not going to cause problems of any sort. I mean, the worst thing you could do, but adding new columns that might impact old stuff would be, maybe a performance issue, but unlikely, realistically. So I don't think adding new community features is likely to impact any of the other HiveMind functionality much. That's why I wasn't really too worried about, just jumping in and adding new community features. I don't
that makes sense.
Impact.
Yeah, it makes sense. The rest is more about some pretty specific ideas. But yeah, as I saw how role mutes were implemented, where it's only on the data on the API layer versus using the isMuted column on the posts. Basically.
Yeah, I saw your disc idea. So basically, let me just rephrase, be sure I understand what you're thinking. So so we have some API calls where even though something's muted, the data gets sent across, but the data is marked as having been muted, so that a front end can then decide whether to show it or not. And then we have other API calls where the data is simply not sent across at all, so the front end doesn't have a decision; it just doesn't get it. We talked about this a little in a pre-meeting, and I think we all came to a conclusion. The simplest thing to do would actually be to have an option in the API call that specifies whether you want the data about whether the muted information or not. So basically, you get the best of both worlds. If the front end literally doesn't want to show the muted data at all in any shape, form, or doesn't plan to, then it could just say, "Don't give that data to me." On the other hand, if it wants to show it, but maybe show it as grayed or allow some potential to show it if somebody clicks on a certain button without having to make another API call, then they would ask for the data, including the muted data. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Sort of give flexibility at the API level to allow the app to get just what it needs if that's all it wants.
Yeah, because basically most of the next changes are going to be quite related to like some sort of mutes, like for instance, members only communities or communities where you can only post your post is only shown if you have a specific set of beneficiaries, or you can only post if you send recurrent transfers and what's not. So yeah, I kind of wanted to have like your opinion on how you see mutes being implemented. And the issue with that kind of stuff is that is basically retroactive stuff. Like if you set all of them muted if you set the muted like roles on the API level, that's fine because then you can like turn it on and off. But for other things, like let's say beneficiaries, you have to keep track of it as it gets submitted, because you want a post who matches the beneficiaries at time X to still be valid even though the beneficiaries changes on time X plus 1. So I guess this is more of like a discussion it's not for another time, but it's something that can be taken offline. It's just I wanted to like get some
at least
broad
introduce
input.
the idea. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like for that, what you'd have to do is probably introduce additional columns or something for that.
Yeah, there is also that discussion where I was thinking of using because right now the only way to tell if a post has been muted or not is the isMuted tag, which implies that there was an actual community the community opt to mute was used. And I thought it could be elegant to use it that way. A community owner can choose to unmute a certain post. That way, he could have let's say beneficiaries is that much, but for a special occasion for that member, I will manually unmute that post so that it can be shown.
Okay.
So it's like stuff I'm thinking about it, but yeah, okay. Yeah, and then should we make a community type updatable? It's more something I need to talk about with the community members. Guilty Party did an excellent job at asking all of them. I mean, most of them. And yeah, they seem to be pretty much interested in the idea. Yeah, and then there is a bunch of other things I would like, which requires more research, like the ability to have a name URL instead of a number. Which requires some governance discussions.
Yeah, that's going to be
which is going to be
primarily.
Yeah, it's going to be a mini paper for sure on like how you like challenge something. Yeah. Anywho, so yeah, I just wanted to get like a general sense of how you guys see the architecture for communities in HiveMind and how I can contribute to it, so that I don't make like a merge request and you're like, nope.
Yeah, I don't think we have any. I mean, I think, kind of a case by case as you come up with things you want to do, let's just discuss them. But overall, I don't think we have any firm opinions on a lot of the community stuff. So
yeah,
our issues are probably going to mostly come up in just, performance, things like that. And, obviously it's good to have discussions just so we don't build ourselves into a limited box somewhere and
exactly.
Restrict ourselves.
But yeah, I don't.
Yeah, we're certainly there to contribute.
Yeah, the main idea was mostly like get the general guidelines, as in SQL query over Python is like a big thing to know.
Yeah, absolutely. That is in fact a particularly important issue. We really want to stay away from the Python stuff as much as possible because that's potentially a bottleneck because it's not really parallel by nature, whereas the SQL stuff is it's like safely parallelized, kind of as foundational to the design.
On a side note, have you? The reason why we're upgrading from 10 to 12 is just because, or do you foresee
it's just because?
Okay, I see. Okay, cool. Then yeah, we are done on my stuff. I can just ask about the GSBG depth ratio and the idea of setting it as like a witness parameter.
Sorry.
So basically, it's about the HBD depth ratio and the parameter for printing or not. Like there has been a lot of discussions since because of the conversion operation printing a lot of HBD. Yeah, I mean you can defend. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Akash.
I don't think he has sound.
Oh. I think he's trying to talk, but we don't hear anything.
Yeah, I think his sound is broken.
Every other week.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So there was a lot of talk about the depth ratio and the printing of HBD. We were close to stop being printing HBD. So we had maybe to react, but the problem was, as Blocktrade said, not knowing too much the exchanges with new art folks just to change this. So here it is to have a discussion. Should this? There are two parameters. So the start printing, where we start to reduce linearly the printing of HBD, and then the stop printing where we stop. So that's 9 and 10% right now. So should these parameters be hard-coded into the code or be parameters?
You mean that we could vote on basically, right, as witnesses?
I'm not a fan of setting it up as witness parameters because it's too having too much impact on whole economy for being decided ad hoc by witnesses. So
honestly, that's my opinion as well. I mean, I'm not firm on it, but my instinctive feeling is basically matches what Gandalf's saying. It's such a big decision to make, and I just don't like it being set. I'd like it to be people to have a firm idea of where it's at all times, and if it's witness votable, then that means it can change at any moment, and that changes the risk ratio for Hive and HBD holders in a big way. So it's like if you weren't monitoring the situation closely, you wouldn't even know that it changed. So that's kind of why I'm against making a witness parameter. It does make it a little more annoying because it can't be, we can't respond quickly. It does put delay time into our response to situations, but on the whole, I think I'd rather have that problem than just the uncertainty that goes along with it being just a voted parameter.
But another thing is that when we introduced reverse conversion, the economy changed. So we should consider changing that parameter for soft cap and hard cap to maybe higher values, like
and right. I mean, so there's right. I think there is some broad agreement in the people, of the stakeholders I've talked to, that we should shift the parameter upwards. So, and I'm generally in favor of that too. I think we could probably shift it to at least 20% without any real risk of significance. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'd like to in this next hard fork to push it up to 20% if that's generally accepted. And I think it will be. But the whole idea of making it just totally flexible, I think it just generates too much uncertainty that I think we should avoid.
Okay, and there were also questions about removing it instead of setting it to 20%.
Yeah, I think that's too extreme by far. It would certainly wouldn't. It would remove the. There would be no debate. Certainly, you would know the rules. There are none. You can create as much as you want, but it's a big step to take, and I would rather do something slower first, like the 20%, and see how that goes, and then we can maybe debate at a later time a really extreme position like just eliminating entirely the cap. But I'm generally not in favor of that, certainly not right now.
Okay, something I agree with. And a last question. We have been lucky last day because the price of Hive raised, making the debt ratio going down.
Mm-hmm.
But can you explain for people what would have happened if we have no Hive price rise?
Sure. So first of all, I'll say I was anticipating the Hive price to go up, so I wasn't really as worried as most people were about pushing up the Hive ratio, the Hive debt ratio, because to me the economics looked like it was such that we were pretty much going to have to see a Hive price rise to which would basically allow us much more headroom before we hit the haircut ratio, and obviously we did. But if Hive for some reason had not responded to economic forces and stayed fixed, then essentially we would have, the first thing that we would have seen was that we would no longer be able to do the conversion function to generate more HBD from Hive as individuals. That doesn't mean that no one could generate HBD anymore. The HDBase stabilizer sits in a somewhat privileged position because it's working with the DAO conversion mechanism. So we would have still had some stabilization forces applied to the HBD price, and the DHF, the decentralized Hive fund, would still be profiting. In fact, it would have been profiting more than anyone else at that point. So it wouldn't have been like HBD price would just likely spiral out of control. It just would have had less downward pressure on it. The other impact, and I guess the one that most people would see most directly, would be that the payouts for posts would then become first a mixture of HBD and Hive, and then if the haircut ratio gets run over enough, then basically posts would start paying out in liquid Hive instead of HBD. But this has happened before. It's never been, I've never considered a big issue. I don't think it's caused anybody too much grief. So I didn't see that as really a big problem from my point of view, at least. I don't know if you have other ideas about it.
Okay. So currently, the haircut only applies to payout to autos.
Payout to autos
and interest
authors.
Authors. Oh yeah, right. It only affects author payouts, right? Because curation is already paid out in powered up Hive, so there's no change for curators.
Okay.
So the changes are mostly, to my mind, not that big. I mean, the most substantial change, of course, is that, I mean, economically, is that once the haircut ratio is broken, you can no longer convert HBD to $1 worth of Hive. You basically, so HBD isn't backed as strongly once the haircut ratio goes into play. But that's not even a problem as long as the price is still, the market price is still higher, because as long as the market's price is higher than $1, you have actually no reason to want to convert at a $1 price when you can, like right now it's at $1.20. I mean, why would you convert at $1 when you can sell it for $1.20? So it would have taken for this to even impact HBD holders in any way, we would have also had to see the market price drop to less than $1 essentially. Mm-hmm. Or at least, I guess the other issue is if somebody just wanted massive liquidity and they couldn't find someone to sell enough of their HBD to at once. But I mean, these are very strange problems that not many people are going to have. There's not a lot of people going around with, I think, $1 million worth of HBD. Mm-hmm. So yeah, overall, I don't think that I was never too worried if we broke the haircut ratio. I didn't see a problem, and I also didn't anticipate that we actually were likely to do it. But anyways, despite all that, I think it does make sense to expand the allowed ratio up to 20%. I think that's a quite safe ratio, and it will allow us to have a more vibrant market for HBD. But so does increasing price of Hive. That's already expanded our potential HBD supply by quite a bit at this point.
Okay.
So I guess that's all I have to say about that, I guess.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure. By the way, just so how reaching back to some of those issues that were talked about, that guilty parties wrote about. So we did review of that, and I did want to make at least one comment. I saw one point here. Someone said, I think my DApp is calling all the recent trending posts from Hive, but then has to filter out the all non-my DApp community posts. And this is why there's a lag in beginning upon loading the site. So I was a little confused about this. Maybe you have some insight into it, but I mean, I don't understand why he's making a trending call for the entire, for all posts. I'm just wondering why the guy isn't just making, I mean, if he's got a single community, he should just be making a trending and recent call for his own community. There's such calls existing already. So I don't know who that's for, but maybe we ought to just let them know that there are already existing API calls that he can be using for that, assuming that he's talking about one community.
Even if he has multiple communities, it would be more efficient to just
he could just
call both.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know whose point that was, but if maybe guilty parties can contact him and let him know.
I'll specify in matter more steps of the meeting, he says. Yeah, okay. Let me just skim through the notes. Ability of URL name would be cool if admin could choose the way each roles interact with the community. I mean, yes, but it's I think it's better to have them hard-coded and maybe change the titles. I mean, yeah, it comes back to what.
Which one are we talking about? Sorry.
So second point in others, it's basically
Oh yeah, I thought
custom
this was maybe
permissions.
too complicated.
I mean, it's not that complicated, but it
I mean,
brings
if
a
I
whole new
understood,
array.
let me just be sure I understand it correctly. It sounded like they wanted to take like a set of features and say this set of features matches this particular role.
Yeah, pretty much.
If I understood the question right. Yeah, I think that's too complicated. I don't feel like we should see a role being different things in different communities. I think it should have, I mean, I think for people to understand easily what that role means, they should know across communities that it means the same thing.
I don't know. I feel like you could have like small moderator, big moderator, stuff like this. But when you think about it, also, I like to look at Reddit and the way, because
I'm just saying, I think that they should identify correctly what they are. You see a role and you should know what it means. You shouldn't have to go look it up to see for that community what it means.
Yeah, and to be fair, Reddit just has moderators, and moderators are higher than other moderators, and that's it. And they are doing quite well, so
yeah,
we can try to replicate that success. But it kind of goes back to what Crimson Cat said, and that what community owner wants basically is like granularity and being able to do whatever they want to like pull off whatever crazy experiment they have and stuff like this. But that's it goes in like the hard to make and not that great of a harvest.
Reward ratio.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
First language is hard. Yeah, it would be nice to actually be able to see the reason behind a muted user. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. But
yeah, that just sounds like something that could be fixed pretty easily.
Yes and no. Yeah, okay. It kind of requires a new table or a new row, I guess. We're not making.
Well, it sounds like the data is already stored. I think. I mean, I read it. It's the data is probably already stored, but just not being. There's no API to fetch it, but I could be wrong.
I think it's stored.
It's written like there's.
I think it's just like, I got muted and I want to know why. Like as a member, I got the muted role. I mean, which right now
I think anybody might want to know why the user got muted, right? But I think I think what's happening now is, as far as I know, you can leave a reason right now for why someone's muted, and I suppose that reason gets written to the database. But
maybe. Yeah, I'll have to get back on that. I don't know.
Anyways, yeah, I think it's not an unreasonable ask. Anyways, I think.
Yeah, true.
In any case,
I would like it to be upgradable, but I don't know what other improvement I can think of. That's honest, at least. Yeah, okay, I guess cross post and more tags. I get it. Any flexibility that you can give to communities would be great. Yeah, good. Appreciate being able to sort members by date and alphabetical and search. Yeah, easy. One functional chat per individual community. It's very hard. And yeah, and better search engine. Yeah, okay. So yeah, none of those. I mean, some are harder than others, but I think I'll make on top of this post another post to like reach out to every community owners to like get their wish list, let's say, and then I can start to sort through that.
Seems reasonable.
But yeah, that's about all I have. Oh wait, someone is writing in the chat. Crimson Clad. What I mean by this is largely is doing as much as we can at the API ratio and then helping them understand what things are actually.
Level.
Yeah, UI.
The API level.
Yeah, okay. My fingers are broken. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But yes, okay. Yeah, and that's it for me. Do you guys have anything else?
Nope, that's all for me.
That's all for me too.
Good camera. Thumbs up. Okay, well then see you in 2 weeks, I guess. Thank you for coming.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye. See you.
Bye. Thanks.